And welcome to Smeg and the Femmes, a podcast to discuss Red Dwarf from a different perspective. I'm Jen Amelie, and today I'll be talking about Series 3, Episode 5, Timeslides, with the help of my guest, Feline Ranger. Hello, welcome back to the podcast.
Oh, very nice to be back again.
I'm glad to have you back. Okay, so the opening scene, the way it sort of dives straight into sort of confronting the fact that Lister is actually going through a serious depressive episode. It's not really. It's unusual for the show to be quite this blatant about the fact that that he's in a really bad situation and his mental health is suffering.
Yeah, he's normally the sort of the sunny, optimistic one, and this is one of those few episodes that kind of flips it round and allows Lister to be grumpy. And actually, it's one of the few episodes that allows him to be a little bit immoral as well. There's been a few of them kind of down the years. I mean, the other one that kind of stands out is Ticket to Ride, obviously, in Series 7. But, usually Lister is the moral compass. And in this episode, he kind of goes a wee bit askew.
It's true, yeah. I like this much better than Ticket to Ride because I think, well, it's just a better episode and it kind of explains his actions a lot better, I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I meant to make this point. I think I have to credit actually. I don't think I would have thought of this if not for a fandom fellow author that you're also aware of, Kelly of Smeg, pointing out that it's entirely possible that he has postnatal depression here.
Yes, obviously a hangover from losing the twins between Series 2 and 3. It's never really touched on again in the show. You get that kind of scrolling opening in backwards, and then it's just kind of never touched on again, which is a bit of a shame. But I think you could certainly read that in there. I think that's
you get a few
that's a reasonable assumption.
Like I've given birth to twins and demons and angels, but he never, gets into how he feels about it. And I do understand why, because obviously it will be a huge downer in what's supposed to be a comedy show, but on the other hand, it is a huge thing to brush over.
I think it gets sort of brought up once, doesn't it, in Demons and Angels, kind of very briefly glossed over.
Birth to twins, and I think, I think there is a reference also in Back in the Red of all episodes, where there's this joke about him ironing clothes or something, something related to babies, and he must have, I must admit it's been a few years since I did that, and you suddenly remember, actually, in series 8 of all kind of heteronormative series, you do get this quick reminder that he has actually given birth himself. It's interesting.
I made a little note.
It's okay. I thought for a second, oh God, have we lost the sound again? But we're okay.
I made a note as well that there's, funnily enough, talking about sort of the moral implications of this episode, that it's suggested at the very beginning of the episode that Rimmer has been to church.
Yes,
he walks in humming a little hymn and says, "Oh yes, what a wonderful service." And again, that's something that's never really referred to again.
Yeah, that is kind of interesting, isn't it? Because obviously, can't be talking about anything other than a religious service, from the context. And of course, we do later in the episode find out that his parents were religious, and although he didn't agree with it, he was very they had the right to their beliefs, which seems for Rimmer so unusually tolerant, frankly.
I wonder if that's where it comes from later in the episode, where Lister kind of says about his plan, and Rimmer goes, that's immoral. And it's like, really, Rimmer?
Of course, obviously, that's Rimmer gets over that very quickly when he realises he can, manipulate it for his own benefit too. But still, yeah.
But I just kind of love the idea of him just sat there on his own, and I don't know who's conducting the service. Is it pre-recorded? Is it like a robot, like in Futurama, where they've got the pastor robot? I want to know.
It must be some kind of pre-recorded video. I don't know. Maybe the Scutters were involved in some way.
There's a thought.
Yeah. yeah. So yeah, I mean, I did notice.
They did the whole thing by charades.
It's kind of just, well, a bit of a non sequitur, but I think it's kind of might also be to underline the fact that everybody else is having a nice, pleasant Sunday afternoon chilling out. I mean, Rimmer's been to a religious service, Kat is happily playing games, and Crichton, we find, is actually dancing as he develops photos. So everyone except Paul Lister is having fun.
Yeah. And of course, developing photos, that you kind of wouldn't get that episode now, would you?
Of course, yeah, you really, really wouldn't. I mean, I feel like feel about 1,000,000 years old. You see children. Back in the day, you had to actually develop photos, and you just instantly appear on your phone.
Yeah, you couldn't see them right away. You had to wait for 3 weeks for them to come back before you could see if the selfies were any good.
Exactly. Yes. I mean, God. I mean, it really was not very long ago, and yet it feels so long ago.
I mean, a lot of people do still do like photography, don't they? And there is still an art to the darkroom, but it's very much a niche thing now, isn't it?
I suppose, yeah. I mean, I assume there must still be some people
Club on board.
Take
That's why they've got the darkroom.
The old-fashioned way. I mean, just like there are still people who buy vinyl records or whatever. Right. Okay. Yeah. So moving on to the scene with Crichton developing the photos. I mean, what really struck me was he's clearly having a whale of a time. He's dancing to rock music. He's obviously enjoying himself. And yet in the next episode, we're told he's never enjoyed himself.
Yeah, I kind of wonder if that party was like a kid's party. Like sort of jelly and ice cream, whereas the party he has with the rest of the boys is more like a grown-up party.
You mean the Nova 5 ladies? Yeah. I guess that's possible. We do see them later on. I noticed in one of the other photos doing the conga. And I mean, it's all really, really very sweet actually. The fact that the Nova 5 ladies would throw him a surprise birthday party. I mean, it kind of bit of an insight into their relationship. I mean, yes, I mean that's a good point you make. Maybe it was more kind of a kid's birthday party as opposed to an adult birthday party, which would make sense given what David Ross Crichton was like. But it's still very touching.
Yeah, and it kind of shows as well that that thing of the relationship that he had with them, and kind of shows why he's sort of amalgamated into the current crew as well as he has, because he is used to having that level of companionship with the people that he's serving.
I mean, it's really all very cute. I mean, in the book, it's more implied that they kind of just sort of tolerate him, but they are kind of very different people with different names in the book. Whereas in the show, the implication is that they actually liked him and got on well with him. And I was thinking to myself, I wonder if those photos from that party, if it's before the accident, as in the Nova 5 crashing, or after the accident. I really hope it's after it.
Yeah. Yes. Otherwise, they might not have been quite so friendly afterwards.
True, but maybe they got over it, and more to the point, they recovered from their injuries and so on.
Yeah.
I hope anyway.
Yeah. A very different canon there between the TV show and the book, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I like the way the book changes them, because they're more sort of. I mean, well, at least one of them is a bit old. It's a bit older, and it's kind of more sort of. And she's actually the captain of the Nova 5, and it just kind of feels a bit more realistic than three 20-something women just happening to be the only survivors of a crash. But I mean, I like it in that way. But in the show, it's cute.
Well, they also get lines in the book, which is an improvement.
So there is that as well. that is definitely an improvement. I mean, and you find out, what their actual jobs were, and what the Nova 5 mission actually was. I mean, admittedly, it was a pretty trivial mission, but it was interesting. They were it was a giant advert for Coke. If I recall.
It adds life, yeah. Which sadly, it's meant to be one of those sort of capital dystopia jokes, but it feels all too attainable, doesn't it?
It really, really, really does. I must say, I love the joke, the dig that Robin dug it in, and saying it costs about the same as the entire US military budget. So ridiculous though it is, it's still marginally more sensible.
Yeah.
I mean, that really is a good joke. In a grim kind of way.
We still here?
Right. Okay. So moving on to the rest of the photos. Let me see. And yeah, Frank's wedding. That's I mean, of course, Chris plays Frank, and that's an interesting little insight to one of Rimmer's brothers, I guess.
Yeah, it's a shame that we don't get to see young Rimmer in the picture, isn't it?
Wonder if the implication there is that he wasn't actually invited. Or he was.
I assume the implication was that he was taking the photo.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, actually, it would make more sense if he was taking the photo, because otherwise, how would he have got the photo?
You can kind of imagine, with Rimmer's family, they'd just be, shove the camera into his hands and be like, "Here, you do it. We don't need you in the picture."
Yeah, I mean that makes the most sense, because otherwise, how would he have got hold of the photo? I do remember actually there was a fanfic which posited that he wasn't actually allowed to attend the wedding, and his mum made him buy photos. So I mean, I thought it's plausible, but I mean, would they actually be quite that bad? I don't know. Who knows?
And of course, that scene has the immortal line in there of "Squire Hoppit."
Yes, Squire
Which
Hoppit.
just cracks me up every single time.
Yeah, it's just so very. It's clearly the use of the word squire is clearly a Rimmer family thing.
Yeah. Yeah, the whole scene with all the different photographs is quite interesting, and the idea that it's not just negatives that he gets the picture out of Rimmer's magazine as well as Nuremberg.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah, of course, yeah. That is obviously the fact that Crichton got that from Rimmer's Fascist Dictator Monthly is kind of disturbing in a way, but I mean, it completely fits with what we know. We already knew he was into fascist dictators. It completely fits what we know of Rimmer.
Yeah, no, that checks out, doesn't it? But,
yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, it does lead to a rather satisfying thing with Lister going into the picture and punching him.
Yeah, he's scuffling with Adolf Hitler.
You can't just stick one that either. It's such an interesting contrast, of course, to way fast forwarding to Series 12's Cured, when they actually meet what they think is Hitler, and Rimmer's attitude is so dramatically different. Then it's odd, but yeah.
But that's the result of spending many years with Lister, isn't it? That
I suppose it is. Yeah, he's evolved. And also, you can make the point, that Incured specifically are reformed and therefore do not have the power, which would attract Rimmer to start with, because he's more attracted to the power than their actual politics. It's a fact that he feels powerless, in his life, and so he's attracted to these people who have power and do basically what they like, which is understandable. I mean, a lot of people are. I mean, it's just unfortunate that he picked those particular people to idolise.
Yeah, it's probably best not to speculate too much on that.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the future setting, the fact that they're in the future does make it a little bit more understandable, because I mean, I guess it would be like in the present day, someone deciding to idolise.
Putin?
I don't know. Pick some medieval king. I mean, of course, some of them were already quite a long way in the past. With Napoleon, Alexander the Great. It's really only Hitler that really makes you think. Come on, Hitler. I mean, come on.
I mean, I guess from the context of the show, for them, even that would have been sort of several hundred years ago, wouldn't it?
I mean, so I mean, it is from the perspective of the characters in the show. It's a little bit more understandable than it is for us watching it in the present day, because it's more remote, removed.
But yeah, that whole scene is it's so full of like great little moments and great lines, and Cat throwing the snowball at Lister, and yeah, just love it.
I love the timing there, where Cat just snatches it and throws it back to him so quickly. I mean, it's like blink and you miss it. I mean, the timing is so good.
Cat-like reflexes.
Exactly. Yes.
And the fact that he catches it and then looks at it with such disdain.
Yeah, I mean, that is so cat-like. I mean, it's like your cat, flicking a cat toy back at you in a, what is this? What is this rubbish?
Yeah.
So very, very, very cat-like that. One more thing about the Hitler photo, the Hitler bit. I did wonder when we cut to the newspaper with list all the front as the escaped assassin. Where the hell did they get that paper from?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. But I mean, Holly obviously has access to some kind of like archives, doesn't she? Because when later on in the episode she's sort of searching what I guess we would now call the internet.
It must be the internet, all the 3 million years later equivalent of it, because So I guess she must have searched her databases and found that.
I mean, maybe Red Dwarf has like a big sort of archive library, and she can kind of access everything that's in there. And of course, when they changed the timeline, maybe that newspaper appeared in their library.
I suppose that must be it, yeah, because I mean, as we see later in the episode, I mean, her databanks change to Lister having invented the tension sheet, and then they change back to it being Vicky Holden, So yeah, that must be what happened. Yeah. Okay, so moving on to the scene with young Lister and the Sham Glam, which is a very interesting scene. A scene I personally find, and I'm sure you do too.
I love that Sham Glam Lister costume. Like, absolutely, unironically, love it. I would wear that.
It's so cute, and I love the way, I mean, Howard obviously thought to himself, well, I can't do leather because Lister's got that covered, so what else? Glittery denim.
And the glitter in the hair as well, and the makeup.
Exactly, yeah, it is, I mean, it's really, really very cute. I mean, obviously, shout out to Emil Charles, I mean, he does a really good job.
He's brilliant, isn't he? He's just like such a little ray of sunshine.
Oh, yeah, I mean, he's just, he really, really is adorable, I mean, I think he was about the age that Lister was supposed to be. I mean, I think he was about 17 at the time, and as Craig himself has said, the fact that he's, younger, has a less sort of kind of lived-in voice, and he still has that sort of idealistic gleam in his eyes, where it just works.
So I think just that.
Yeah, sorry. Craig could technically have played the part himself because he still looks young enough. But I mean, I think it does kind of work better having a different person do it.
I think just the vibe that it gave that scene of having Craig's younger brother was just brilliant. Because
when they sort of get in each other's faces, that is such a classic brother thing to do.
And I think if they just had like a random person, it still would have been a great scene, but you wouldn't have had that same kind of vibe there. And that bit where he says to him, like, just sit down and shut up. It's like such an older brother.
It's absolutely hilarious. The the generation gap. I mean, Craig and Lister here are both only 25, yet the contrast, it's like, I mean, his embarrassment and thinking, oh God, I mean, I'm old, I mean, it's funny.
It's like less than a decade has gone past, and he's already like, God, I was stupid.
It's so interesting, I mean, and let's face it, I mean, most people, when they're teenagers, and I include myself in that, they are idiots to some extent. Because they haven't got the life experience. They think they know it all, and then and a few years later you realise, no, you didn't. No, you don't.
And also, I made a note here that in like true Red Dwarf tradition, you've got a little plot hole that when they bring the photo up on the screen of young Lister on stage, you can't see the table and chairs that they go and sit at. So technically, they have moved outside the frame of the photograph, which they're not supposed to be able to do.
Of course, they break that later on. Of course, with Rich Lister in his mansion as well. I'm pretty sure. I mean, all the only reference he has is the exterior of the house, and yet somehow Rimmer manages to go into it. So it's they break their rules all the time. It's kind of odd that they went to the trouble of establishing that you couldn't move outside the photo, and then just randomly.
Hello. Oh, I think my signal dropped out then for a second.
Contradicting yourself in the same episode.
Yeah, I did wonder. I had like a theory, because obviously he says we can't just get a picture of Earth and go back there. But if they got like a picture taken from the International Space Station that showed like, at least half of the globe, then like maybe they could have found a way around it.
They could have, come to think of it, couldn't Lister have just found a photo of Fiji?
Yeah. But then it raised the question of like, what would they have done if they'd like got on a plane and the plane had been travelling outside the frame of the photograph? Would the plane have like crashed because the plane couldn't travel? Would they have just disappeared out of the plane?
No, I'm
thinking too hard about this, but
it's okay. It kind of makes my head spin, because it just obviously it doesn't make any sense. Once you start to think about it, the whole thing unravels. So it's yeah. Oh yeah, I did want to say one more thing about young Lister. It's interesting to me how very obvious it is, that he was influenced by Rob and Doug's own teenage years, because obviously they grew up during the 70s when glam rock was all the rage, So clearly they were looking back at their own teenage years and drawing from that.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what everybody does, isn't it? And like if you look, for example, at Derry Girls now, that's looking, the writer looking back on her teenage years in the 90s with the clothes and everything. For everybody, those are kind of formative years that you tend to sort of go back to, aren't they, and reference.
Yeah, it's odd for me because my teenage years kind of straddled the late 80s, early 90s, so I can kind of relate to both, I'm a bit older than the Derry Girls are supposed to be, but obviously I can remember the 90s, and I remember the fashion, the music, the general attitude, and I'm like, God, was it really that long ago? Help.
I was talking to my husband the other night, and we were saying about the 90s is as long ago now as Austin Powers was in the 90s.
Which is freaking scary, when you think about it.
Yeah.
But yes. Uh-huh.
Time comes to us all.
It does. Oh, well, I'm just gonna say one thing here, which. It's just a little thing that's been bugging me. I have seen some people point to the fact that young Lister is wearing loads of sort of glitter and makeup and so on, as some kind of indication, of his sexuality, And personally, I do think Lister is bisexual, but I don't think that specifically because of this outfit. Because I know that during the actual 1970s, a lot of straight musicians wore that kind of thing because they knew they knew women found it attractive. It wasn't because they were experimenting with their own sexuality necessarily. It's because they knew it was a chick magnet, basically. So I guess what I'm saying is, although I do think Lister is bi, I don't necessarily think that because of the outfits he wore as a teenager. I happen to know, that in the 1970s. A lot of glam rock musicians who were completely straight, wore that kind of thing just because they knew that it was attractive to women, and it got them a lot of women, So I mean, it doesn't necessarily.
Yeah, it was kind of a political statement as well at the time, wasn't it?
That too, yeah. I mean, obviously, some of these musicians were bisexual, like David Bowie, for instance, but not all of them. I mean, a lot of them were like, oh, I'm not wearing makeup. What do you think I am? And then but then once they realised, that it was a way to get famous and get a lot of female groupies, they were like, okay, fine. Oh yeah, the roundabout point I'm making is, although I absolutely do think Lister is bi, I don't think that's specifically because his younger self wore glitter and makeup. That's just sort of byproduct. Lifestyles of the disgustingly rich and famous. I love that title.
Yes, it's basically they should have just that's what they should have called Keeping Up with the Kardashians.
Yes, I mean it's just more honest, isn't it?
Made in Chelsea.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, you probably know, don't you, that the original choice for Ruby Wax's part was Graham Chapman of the Monty Python troupe, but unfortunately, he died, So obviously they need a replacement, But personally, I find Ruby is absolutely fine here. I'm not someone who's a fan of Ruby Wax in general, but I mean, I think she does well here. She really sort of makes a sort of vaguely obnoxious American presenter, a good. It's good.
Yeah, she sells it, doesn't she?
She does, yeah. I know you could say, it's kind of typecasting if you're being really nasty, but I don't hate Ruby Wax, I'm a kind of sort of neutral towards her, so I mean, I wouldn't go out of my way to watch her programmes because her persona isn't generally my cup of tea, but I mean here she works just fine. I mean she delivers the exposition just fine. It's we need to find out about Rich Lister, and it does a job.
And I love the way she delivers that line about this man has a wad so thick you could use it to beat whales to death.
Yeah. I also love the way she says his life has been tinged with tragedy. Well, actually, it hasn't, but we can only hope.
Yeah.
It's just anyway, right? Okay, so moving on to the my favourite part of this episode, the whole Rich Lister scene. I have to say, we get about 5 minutes of Rich Lister, and I'm like, I want more.
Yeah, it makes an impact.
I mean, I'm very impressed, by the way, at the fact that they had enough of a budget to film at an actual huge stately home.
Yeah, you can tell in series 3 that the budget had really kind of skyrocketed, or at least that they were doing more with the budget that they had.
Exactly. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean,
a lot of extras as well in this episode.
Yes, a lot of extras. Definitely, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I was going to say, I love the way all the servants, they put their hands up, for a high five, without even,
as he goes past,
without even being asked. They're clearly used to it.
Yeah, that's the standard routine. But I think it's really interesting. I don't know whether this episode was written before or after the books came out, but obviously there's a lot of comparisons to be drawn here between the behaviour of Rich Lister in Timeslides and Rich Rimmer in the books in Better Than Life.
Yeah, I do actually. The first 2 books had already come out, so yeah, Better Than Life was already out there.
And you can kind of see the echoes of that, which obviously is very different in the books, that the idea of, that Lister doesn't want wealth and is happy with his little life in Bedford Falls. But obviously in this episode, this is a Lister who kind of got everything handed to him at 17 years old. And so the attitude there is different. He hasn't had the life experience to work out what's important to him yet. So yes, he's gone. He's
That
gone
makes
for like
sense,
the
yeah,
money and the
I
house and the
actually say
trophy
so
wife.
different to the book. Makes sense because he was significantly younger when he became rich, so that would explain why it's so dramatically different to Infinity Welcomes Careful Drivers, where he just wants to live in It's a Wonderful Life.
And there's that sense as well that, even Lister in the show hasn't quite matured in the same way that Lister in the book has at this point.
That is true, yeah. Because obviously, yeah. Yeah, because when we meet sort of present day Richard Lister, obviously played by Craig, it's obvious, that he is enjoying being rich. And good for him. But why shouldn't he enjoy being rich? But you can see him wearing. Oh yeah, I was going to say, I love the way he still wears a Flintstones t-shirt underneath his jacket.
Yeah, he's rich Lister, but he's still very much Lister.
Exactly, yeah. That is actually a difference between him and Rich Rimmer, actually, because basically, Rich Lister, yes, he will, buy posh expensive things, and live in a huge house, but still wear what he likes and he'll still eat what he likes. He still wants to eat those gross sausage sandwiches that he used to eat when he was in the band. And he has them helicoptered in. Whereas with Rimmer, it has to be in the book. It has to be the most expensive everything. Nothing cheap whatsoever.
Yeah, no, definitely. There's that sense that he's still Lister, but just more so in a way.
Exactly, yeah. Oh, and whilst we're on this part of the episode, I do want to say, because every time I watch this bit, I want more of it. So thank you very much for writing your lengthy alternate universe fic, which expands upon this, because it's a great fic.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I'm glad you said that because it wouldn't have been classy if I had. But
yeah, for anyone listening to this, it's called Run to You, and you can find it under Feline Ranger on Archive of Our Own. If by any chance you haven't read it, I think most people listening to this probably have, but you never know.
I used the episode as like a jumping off point, and I sort of toyed with it a little bit. But yeah, I used it as the jumping off point. But
yeah,
one of the things. One of the things I kind of noted.
Person to do it actually, because obviously that is a very rich alternate universe that we glimpse here.
And one of the things I kind of noted actually was that obviously in the universe of the episode, the whole marriage between Lister and Sabrina is kind of, you're assuming it was about the money, because in the original timeline she married Thickie Holden.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that in this universe she also married Lister kind of suggests that she married for the wealth rather than the person.
Yeah. Yeah, it does kind of suggest that, doesn't it? But having said that, she's described as model, best-selling novelist, international jet setter. She's the Duke of Lincoln's eldest daughter. She can't exactly be hard up for money herself, can she?
No, you wouldn't have thought so. No, but yeah, that was just one of the things that I kind of found was kind of interesting. The idea that Lister has essentially stepped wholesale into somebody else's life, but that the people around don't necessarily seem to have reacted any differently.
It is kind of interesting, though, as you say, the implication, is that no matter what, she would have married whoever happened to invent the tension sheet. I don't know. I know it's kind of. What to say? I guess you could say no matter what, she was destined to marry whoever it was who happened to invent it. It's got nothing to do with the particular person. It's just kind of timelines, causality, etc., etc. It's hard to say. I do want to say one thing, though. At least she's a bit older, and clearly more sort of world mature than Juanita in the book, So there's that.
Yeah, that's definitely a lot better.
Yeah,
She said she doesn't look 19.
exactly.
She looks good, but not 19.
I mean, she's beautiful, don't get me wrong, but she's clearly somewhere in her 20s, possibly even 30s, and has obviously lived a bit, and isn't barely out of childhood, it's just healthier.
But what do we think of the chances of getting Koo Stark at Dimension Jump?
Slim to non-existent, given the way that Rob and Paul Jackson took the smeg out of her on one of their lockdown commentaries.
They hired her.
They got Lee Corns to dress up in a wig and take the piss, basically. It's a shame, actually, because I actually enjoy her appearance in this episode. I know she's only got a few lines, but I think she's good. I find her enjoyable. Of course,
and she's one of the few female guest stars who actually gets to crack a joke.
Oh yeah, yeah. Of course, yeah. That does definitely make a change. Although, of course, the problem is if in some if some fantasy scenario they did get a dimension jump, obviously all the questions would be about a certain prince.
We don't talk about Andrew.
Yep.
That can be the royal family's new anthem. We don't talk about Andrew. No.
Spitting Image was still going, they would definitely have the puppets doing a song saying, "We do not talk about Andrew."
Yeah, definitely. And of course, they do mention in this little snippet as well that Gilbert says that the peeing statue is going to be ready for the royal visit. They obviously haven't held it against him that he had Buck Palace ground up for his drive.
Really, yeah. I guess that must be an implication of how rich and powerful Rich Lister is in this scenario.
Yeah. And I think it is worth pointing out as well that the little the little statue of Lister peeing into the pool, that I think it's in one of the commentaries that Craig says that he actually kept that. And it's actually only a few inches tall, but he has it peeing into his fish tank.
Well, of course he would, that is very Lister. Again, that is something that Rich Rimmer wouldn't do, because he's too insecure about his penis, I think, basically.
Bit of blurring there between actor and character.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I can't believe actually that we got this far. We haven't praised Gilbert's actor because he is so good.
Yeah, those little eye rolls and just the whole thing. He's really great, isn't he? It's really subtle performance, but very funny.
It's just one of those performances where you think, hold on, I don't really recognise this actor, but they're really bloody good. It sends you rushing to Google to find out what else they were in. Unfortunately, Google informs me that the actor died young, but which is very sad.
Oh, downer.
Yeah, he died about a decade after he appeared in the episode, sadly.
But no, that whole scene with Rimmer in the dining room, and he's saying, Rimmer, the brown gentleman's name is Rimmer, sir. Just.
Yeah, I remember someone pointing out, that he almost manages to steal the scene from Chris, which, takes a lot.
And there's a lot of, I should have mentioned this earlier, there's a lot of crossover, actually, between this episode and Stasis Leak as well. First of all, that idea of sort of going back in time to try and change things. But also, originally in Stasis Leak, it's, Lister wants to go back and be with Kachansky. In this episode, he just wants to go back and not live the life that he's got. But both episodes kind of have Rimmer sort of trying to prevent him from going one way or another.
Yeah, you're right. There's definitely a thematic similarity. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The scene in the dining room where he's saying, we were friends, we were buddies. I've given you the best years of my death.
Exactly. Yeah. I was going to say, actually. Rich Lister, I mean, from Craig's acting here, he truly, genuinely does not seem to recognise Rimmer, but you kind of would think he would, given how young Lister really seemed to like Rimmer, and remarked on the H and so on. You'd think he would.
I mean, just literally the fact that this is the guy who turned up with his future self and changed his life. You'd think that might have made an impact.
Wouldn't you? I had seen the argument made. Well, do you remember everyone that you met in a pub several years ago? Well, obviously not. But I mean, you'd think Rimmer would have kind of stood out in his memory.
Maybe it's the problem with the whole sham glam era was that everybody looked so weird that Rimmer just didn't stand out.
But that is a good point. I mean, when you look at the other members of young Lister's band, for instance, yeah. Mm-hmm. By the way, we're partly an actual band called Napalm Death.
Yes. Who I think Craig had met doing a TV show that he was presenting.
Yes, I remember seeing a clip or a photo from it or something. So obviously, presumably that's how he got them in. Oh yes, talking of music, actually, we should probably mention that Craig Charles, the actual real life actor and musician, is responsible for some of the music in this episode.
Never got paid. Never.
Never got credited. I mean,
as he likes to remind everybody.
You can't blame him for being pissed off. I mean, in the commentary, he seems to blame Howard Goodall, and I'm like, come on! Surely it wasn't Howard's responsibility for that kind of thing, the credits and the cash and stuff. Surely that would be somebody else's responsibility. I would have thought.
He points out as well, doesn't he, that he feels that Howard sort of lifted that style of the band to do the incidental music for a lot of the series.
Right, yeah, I guess he might have. I mean, we know that Howard is quite honest about admitting that a lot of the music he wrote was directly influenced by other music. Like, for instance, the Ace Rimmer theme was based on "Take My Breath Away" by Berlin and so on. So I mean, I guess that's entirely possible.
I can't imagine that Craig was that upset about it, or he would have, I'm sure, made more of a fuss at the time.
Sure, yeah, yeah. I'm sure it was just general kind of behind the scenes incompetence, which we know is kind of a factor in the production of Red Dwarf, but we know because they tell us at every opportunity.
Yes. But yeah, just something he likes to have. He likes to just make sure it's not forgotten. He likes to bring it up every now and then.
Exactly. Yes. Okay. So I mean, I guess unless you've got anything else to say about Rich Lister, we should probably move on to the next scene, which would be young Rimmer at boarding school. Yes. Do you have anything else to say about Rich Lister?
No, that's fine. But yeah, poor little baby Rimmer with his boxing gloves. The little boy they got to play him was so cute.
I mean, he really was so cute. I mean, it's like it's interesting because I mean, obviously, anyone who you're used to seeing as an adult, if you suddenly see them as a child, it's going to be like, oh, look at them, But I mean, young Rimmer is so sort of mild mannered and amenable, and it kind of makes your heart go out to him a bit.
Yeah, he hasn't developed that spikiness yet, has he?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Oh.
And he does his little Rimmer salute at the end.
Exactly, yeah, and of course, even his teddy bear's got a military helmet on it. I mean, his family's military provocation has already made its impact.
Yeah, and of course, there's the ongoing discourse about the purpose of the boxing gloves, isn't there? About whether he sort of wore them as sort of self-defense because he was bullied so badly, so that if people kind of snuck up on him in the night, he could get a good whack in, or whether it was for other purposes.
I prefer the first explanation because, apart from anything else, I mean, I can understand him being made to wear them if he was a teenager, but I mean, who would make an 8-year-old wear boxing gloves to stop them? Well, you know what I'm implying. I mean, he's 8, for God's sake.
Boarding schools are weird.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. The child actor who plays Vicky Holden is good as well.
He does seem to be, although at least my untrained eye, I don't know much about kids. He does seem to be several years older.
Yeah, I remember Hattie. Hattie says when he appears, "Ooh, he's a fog." He does.
Yeah.
He does kind of. I'm stereotyping. He does kind of look like the kind of kid who would bully other kids, which is really odd because that's not his character. Rimmer doesn't say he was a bully. He says he was a target of bullies, so it's kind of odd.
But he does look, as I say, to my untrained eye, like he's maybe about 10 rather than 7 or 8.
I guess it was just a question of what child actors in roughly the right age range they could get presumably.
Maybe he'd been held back because of being so thick.
Well, that would explain anything. Of course, we know that Rimmer was held back. So, that would explain. Oh, and of course, people have raised the question, the rather disturbing question: who was taking pictures of children at boarding school? And my answer to that is one of the kids, because everything else is just too creepy.
Yeah, or maybe it was like sort of, keeping tally at the end of the night, making sure they were all there. They could send something to the parents and be, look, they're all here, they're all in bed, they're all accounted for.
Yes, of course, the question is how did Rimmer come to have the photo? But I guess you could ask about all the photos and and most of the photos in this episode. How did so and so get hold of them?
Again, maybe it's a bit like the mansion, that the photo he had was of the outside of the school and he just went in.
So I suppose so. If he can go into the mansion when he's only got a picture of the exterior, then presumably he can go into a picture of the exterior of his boarding school, which would make a lot more sense actually. Because Rimmer having a picture of the outside of his old boarding school makes far more sense than having a picture of a dorm at night.
Again, it's one of those just little Red Dwarf plot inconsistencies where it's best not to dig into it too much.
I suppose so, yes. So, obviously, it's a very neat little scene because, it wraps up, it wraps up the episode very neatly because, obviously Rimmer, Fifi Holden overhears and, Rimmer just ends up putting everything back exactly the way it was. You could argue, I suppose, that Vicky Holden was always kind of destined to invent the tension sheet, and it was just kind of the natural, what was supposed to happen anyway, reasserting itself, But you would think though that it would have occurred to Rimmer, hold on, maybe I shouldn't be telling my younger self all this in front of Vicky Holden.
You'd think, wouldn't you? You'd think.
Yeah.
But, I think we're meant to assume that Vicky kind of sneaks out and does it while Rimmer's still in that morning rugby practice.
I think that is obviously the assumption. Rimmer couldn't go first thing and register it. So Vicky got him first.
One wonders, obviously, it put the Red Dwarf timeline back as it was in terms of the crew. But I wonder whether then getting rich at that very young age then changed Vicky's timeline.
Sorry, what you mean? Vicky got rich at a very young age.
Yeah, because in the original timeline, he didn't get rich until after, obviously, he'd left school and that Rimmer no longer knew him.
Vicky was a millionaire at 26. So I don't know. Presumably, what happened was he registered the patent as a small child, but wasn't able to do anything about it until he was an adult. I assume maybe that was it.
Or maybe like the parents sort of took control of the business until he was 26.
That would make sense, yeah. Obviously that make a lot more sense. Young Lister at 17 was, just about old enough to, to do his own thing, But as you posited regarding your alternate universe, he obviously went off the rails a bit since he ended up marrying 14 times.
Yeah, that's not a sign of someone healthy, really, is it?
Yeah, yeah.
But still, he went out with style.
Yeah, was it? Yeah, I mean, obviously, he was supposed to envy him going out age 98 and making love to his 14th wife, and I guess a lot of people would envy him, but didn't really give the impression of someone who lived a life where they felt loved for themselves rather than their wealth, does it?
Yeah. So there you go. Maybe like she said, maybe his life really was tinged with tragedy.
Clearly, it must have been in some ways, because I mean, nobody divorces 13 times without something being wrong somewhere.
There's got to be a bit of angst in there somewhere.
Sorry.
Yeah, there's got to be some kind of angst in there, hasn't there?
Yeah, I mean, there must be, yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So we're sort of approaching the end of our time. So I just do want to briefly discuss the sort of classic ending. I mean. It's established that Lister, when he comes back, doesn't remember anything, which is obviously very good, because if he did remember anything, he would probably try to kill Rimmer, wouldn't he?
Yeah, he wouldn't have needed that explosion. Lister would have done it for him.
Exactly. Yes. I mean, it's a very sort of classic Grant Naylor sort of heartless ending gag. But I mean, I suppose in some ways, if you're being heartless, you could say it was kind of karma for Rimmer, sort of dragging Lister back from his happy life and stuff. In some ways.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the idea, isn't it? Because he gets his sad little poor me speech at the end, and then you think for like that moment that maybe something good has come of it, and then it's like, nope, not for you.
Yeah, that is so very, very Grant Naylor. I mean, they have so many sort of episodes with sort of classic heartless endings. I mean, it's not always Rimmer that's the brunt of it. I mean, for instance, at the end of Justice and Lister falling down a hole. But I mean, it's a pattern in their writing.
I did notice actually, which I'm not sure I've noticed before, in that scene with the explosion, it does look like you see a bit of Rimmer's torso go flying.
Does, yeah. I mean, it looks like it's it's a bit of, I mean, obviously, it's very obviously a dummy, but I mean, it's kind of gruesome, that you see what is implied to be part of his corpse, yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't noticed that before. I was like, damn, that's harsh.
It's harsh, yes. Oh well, I guess you could argue, that is kind of destined to be a hologram in this timeline, at least, just like Vicky Holden was destined in another timeline to be the tension sheet inventor, and it's just kind of re-establishing how things are meant to be, maybe.
And the fact that Lister and the cat at the end, just like, what was he saying? Just absolutely don't care at all.
Yeah, well, I mean, they obviously didn't realise what happened. They were just like, Rimmer's babbling on again, being Rimmer. But yeah.
You think Cat should be grateful because Rimmer's effectively just brought him back to existence.
Exactly, but I mean, the thing is, Lister clearly didn't remember. So I mean, I don't know. Maybe Cat didn't remember going out of existence and just thought he was back. Didn't realise that he'd actually been away. I don't know. It's kind of ambiguous.
But yeah, as I say, classic kind of Red Dwarf ending of just everything resets and it's back to the status quo.
Yes, exactly. Okay, I'm mindful of the fact that we've talked a bit longer than usual. The reason I've done that is because I've noticed a lot of our episodes been coming up shorter than they actually need to be. So I'm hoping this one when we might actually get to use our full complement of time on our website. So one more thing before I wrap this one up. Scores out of 10, both overall and for slashiness.
I think overall maybe like an 8. I think it's a really fun episode. And it brings up so many questions and possibilities that are really fascinating. In terms of slashiness, maybe I'd say a 7.5. There is that theme, isn't there, again, of it's Rimmer pursuing Lister and always trying to sort of get Lister back.
Yeah, I've given them sort of similar scores. I gave it a seven for slashiness, for the same reason. And basically, I mean, the whole half of the episode is about Rimmer trying to get Lister back. And yes, obviously, his reasons for that are ambiguous. But I mean, however you choose to read them, I mean, you can read them in a slashy way, and obviously, we choose to.
Always.
Of course, yeah. And overall, I think I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10 because I found on rewatching it that I really enjoyed this episode. I mean, I find myself sort of rewatching the Rich Lister part in particular, and and Gilbert and the whole vibe of that 5 minutes or however long it is. It's just really very enjoyable solid episode. So 8.5 out of 10 overall. Okay, and that brings us to the end of this episode of Smeg and the Femmes. Thank you to Hologramet for technical help, and also thank you to my guest, Feline Ranger.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hope you enjoyed listening. If you'd like to give us feedback, you can do so on either Tumblr or Discord, the posts where I've linked to this episode. You can also email us at smegandthefemmes@gmail.com. The next episode we'll be covering is the Found Family classic, The Last Day. I hope you'll join us then. For now, goodbye.